Welcome to another episode of the Omnipod, where we're enabling conversations between life science thought leaders to help you get the most out of your preclinical research.
In this episode of Omnipod, we look into how to keep science moving, even when the money isn't. Grants are tighter, capital budgets are stalled, but your backlogs, submissions, and your project timelines aren't waiting. That's why Omni partners with Blue Street Capital to offer leasing and deferred payment options on our homogenizers, sample prep, and automation platforms. So your lab can install now, sample prep now, improve ROI now, and keep the science moving forward into the future. I'm Bill Schick, fractional CMO, and today I'm speaking with Brandon Farmer, Blue Street Capital, and Pete Tortorelli of Revvity. We're going to dig into how to get creative when budgets are tight, but the work isn't. We'll also talk about strategies for year-end spend and the unique opportunity that the end of 2025 presents all of us for investment. Brandon, Pete, thanks for hopping on today.
Yeah, appreciate the opportunity to speak with you guys. Really looking forward to it.
Bill, Brandon, nice to be here. Thank you.
Give us the 30-second background on you and the company.
Yeah, I'd love to. I've been with Blue Street Capital, who's an equipment finance specific company. Been around since 2002, since early 2019, so 6.5 years now. We specialize in a couple different verticals when it comes to support and equipment needs, mainly IT and the biotechnology and lab specific businesses. We've loved the relationship we've been able to develop with Revvity and the Omnia team specifically, and look forward to digging in here and seeing where else we can help.
Pete, how about you?
Omni makes sample prep equipment that typically goes on the front end of a workflow for analyte extraction. So homogenizers, automated cell disruptors, things of that nature. And sales can be anywhere from benchtop all the way up to, as I said, fully robotic. So this is a good conversation to segue into what Brandon does.
That's great. Let's talk about businesses today. When you talk to them today, owners, managers, anybody involved in driving the business, what are some of the primary themes that you're hearing right now as we kind of roll into the end of 2025?
I love this question, and I always joke it. There's always a reason not to move forward, especially from a C-level financial decision maker who wants to make sure that they're adhering to all the profit loss statements, balance sheet looks strong. That being said, and with the theme of this discussion, we want to keep equipment acquisition and science moving forward regardless of money being an issue. Again, I've been here for 6.5 years. I've heard everything from we're stopping all purchases due to COVID. We can't get equipment off ships. New administration. I've been through 2 of them. There's always an excuse. This year specifically, I am hearing a little bit more about the reduction in the academic market when it comes to supporting purchases through grants, NIL funds, and a slight pullback in the availability from the current administration. That being said, I've heard this for the last year. A lot of companies are to the point where now they know that they need this equipment. It's essential to the continued research they're doing. And we've started to see a trend through some of the initiatives of the Section 179 and Big Beautiful Bill that are showing companies making that decision to whether the CFO wants to sign off on it or not, moving forward with these necessary pieces of equipment through Omnia, through Revvity, and other companies to continue their essential research for the market.
To add to what Brandon described, we're in a unique situation now with coming out of COVID and funding challenges with NIH, tariffs playing a role in budgets being challenged and erased. It's a very hard place to place capital equipment, and there are a lot of things vying for limited resources in pharma companies or universities, and so you really have to get creative to be able to help researchers at the bench, because they don't have the access that they used to have.
I would just note too, and that's a great explanation via Pete, there are always 2 sides to the coin. COVID is a great example of that. Although a lot of companies were pulling back because of the unknowns, there were a lot of companies that were taking advantage of COVID testing, needing scientific and lab equipment, doing their thing, making money through insurance companies and COVID testing and research as well. So although there is that sense of pulling back from an academia and maybe government perspective, there are companies in the private sector that are still pretty bountiful in using funds to acquire necessary technology to keep moving forward.
So with that in mind, I know that, our audience, they're scientists, they're critical thinkers. They want to hear the data and the stories. Brandon, are you able to share an example of a story with a company that seemed like it wasn't going to be able to move forward? They couldn't spend this year, and then ended up moving ahead when they saw maybe what the financial picture looked like with a different solution?
Yeah, of course. And we come across this on an annual basis. There will be a company come the second or third week of December that says, all right, we're ready to go. With that came what we would call out of the blue, or a whale that's ready to move forward. That being said, I did have a company just last month in November. We'll call them Company X, and they really work in the AI and lab space, who just needed to see and understand the ROI a little bit more. It didn't have much to do actually with any depreciation aspects of Section 179 or the Big Beautiful Bill. It was simply understanding that if they acquired this necessary equipment for their business, they had a projection of making X amount of dollars, and we were able to spread cash over 4 years, reducing their monthly payment on a $275,000 project down to the high 5,000s. So once they understood that was the case, and there was a company out there that could mitigate that upfront cost for them, they had an internal huddle. We spoke to C-level. We got sign off, and we were able to approve it fairly quickly for them to continue their growth while moving forward this calendar year. So those situations are always out there. It really comes into an internal discussion. Ultimately, us providing accurate data quickly, being a good partner, and having them make an educated decision on what they want to do.
And Pete, typically in the sample prep side of things, a lot of your competitors really mostly have a handheld or a benchtop system. Omni's a bit different in having a full-blown automation platform. Do you want to talk a little bit about how that might be different, and maybe how some of the financing might look for them?
You're referring to the LH96, which is an automated sample prep platform, combines homogenizing, liquid handling, and reformatting into a 96 well plate. So essentially you're starting in tubes with samples and ending with those samples reformatted into a 96 well plate, so you can move them downstream into whatever the workflow is that you're specifying. So on the front end, you get people who budget for these systems because they know they're needed. Mm-hmm. They know that they have very limited resources at the bench to do this type of work. And so they budget for them at the beginning of the year. And I think Brandon will probably agree with this. As you get into the year, something goes wrong, something breaks, right? You have a mass spec go down or something else, and they have to redirect the budget to replace something that was unexpected. And then typically at the front end, sample prep, homogenization, automation, stuff like that, typically is where the money is stolen from. And so we run into that every year, right? To make it easier for customers who have the budget challenge, leasing is sometimes a really interesting option. In fact, we're working with one customer right now who is looking at a lease because their budget money disappeared in Q3.
To Pete's point, it is a very regular conversation that capital budgets are spent, right? So how can we provide or tailor a product that makes sense for them to still move forward to get the equipment they need? A lot of companies that we work with are also, we're dependent on them moving forward, but they're dependent on their clients signing contracts to move forward, or grants actually funding to move forward. So it is, regardless of if we're in December, it's obviously a great time to speak to payment flexibility year end. But it happens mid-year, it happens Q1, it happens Q3. And I think just being prepared for those conversations is what Blue Street can bring to the table for everybody.
I'll add to that, Brandon, people, right? So significant downsizing in the lab. It's not just CapEx budgets, it's people who are not necessarily employed in the lab anymore, and those lab tasks, the sample prep tasks at the front end, still have to be done.
Yeah.
So what better way to solve that issue, than looking at automation?
That makes sense. And as I'm thinking about that, a lot of these times, I think about all the red tape that I might have to go through and how complicated it might be. Brandon, can you kind of walk us through a typical deal on your side? When somebody reaches out and they need, they're thinking about financing or they're not sure what to do. How do they get started and what does that process look like?
Yeah, that's a great question too, and it's honestly pretty simple. I don't want to oversimplify it, but Blue Street is a little different in the way that we go to market as a company in this in this equipment finance space. We like to partner with the vendor or the manufacturer ahead of time. Revvity, Omni, other companies in the biotech and technology space, so that we can create a trusted and unified approach when a client asks. We train teams from a manufacturer and a vendor space as to when and what they should hear for to queue up a conversation centered around leasing or financing options. And then from there, we create that warm introduction to the client that is interested. So that's a process from a partner. From a client, all I need to know initially is what they're looking to buy, and what the company name is. From there, there's enough public information for me to get a sound idea of how credible the actual business is. Well, once we get introduced to the customer from our trusted partner in the likes of a Revvity, we do have our boilerplate 36-month term, 60-month term, but we really want to dig in with the client to understand what they're looking to move forward with, because they might have a product that they don't understand we have, or we might have a product they don't understand that we have that fits better into their budgeting. So like I said, it is a simple process. I don't want to overcomplicate it. What you're buying, the name of the business. In certain situations, I may or may not need to dig in and request financials, depending on a lot of different facets to the actual project itself. But we work quick. Cliche to say I'll work as quick as information comes back and in, but it is true.
One thing I'd like to clarify, though, you talk about products. In this case, those are sort of financial tools and instruments. Can you give us a quick overview of what those products might look like? Because we don't know.
Yeah. No, great question. We do anything, or we can provide terms anywhere between 1 to 5 years. In certain situations, for highly credible clients, we can get out to 6 or 7 if it makes sense. Mm-hmm. Companies can pay us back on a monthly, quarterly, or annual basis. And when I note products, we have a very straightforward, I always compare it to purchasing a car, an equipment finance agreement. When there's no consideration for tax incentives or write-offs, we can allow companies to borrow money to buy equipment, to own it during and after the contract. So they would pay us monthly or quarterly or annually, depending on what they want to go into contract with. We would pay the manufacturer or vendor in full up front once equipment is fully delivered and working. We also have a variety of different lease options, which is more beneficial from the standpoint of Section 179 and some of the line items in the Big Beautiful Bill. It also is a true lease. It will have a cheaper monthly payment as well, provide the company a lot of flexibility throughout the agreement with us. And I say they're specialized products because in and out of that, we can push a balloon payment towards the end of a term of 20% to mitigate the monthly payments during. We could do step payments where it's $1,000 for 6 months and then it uplifts month 7 to allow them to get to market, see a quick ROI, account for those costs. And then we can just flat out defer payments for up to 3 months too. So they can acquire the necessary equipment, get it on site and working, not see a dollar come out of their account for 90 days, which allows them really the flexibility to predict cash flows and get product up and moving in a quicker basis without stressing about paying on time.
Okay, so basically I need the equipment to earn the money down the road, and there's always a ramp up time. It doesn't happen overnight, and you have some kind of tool that will accommodate whatever that financial schedule looks like.
Yeah, we work, like I said, the boilerplate offering I would then say is, hey, let's get this ordered, let's get you approved, let's agree to terms. We can book your first payment out for 90 days. Another one is we work in the academic space, and a lot of grants are projected to come in or guaranteed annually. Maybe they want to pay annually. They want their first annual payment to be slightly smaller than their second and then slightly smaller than their third. So maybe it's $50,000 year one, $100,000 year two, $150,000 year three. So that's the reason we like to get in there, get our hands a little bit dirty when it comes to the ultimate goal of the client, so that we can really make sure when I say product, it's really a product offering. Are we putting the best payment plan in front of them that makes most sense, not only for us, for the client, and also our vendor partners, so they can see success and buy more.
Pete, do you have any stories you want to share where, maybe an opportunity was stuck because of financing and this unlocked them?
We have a customer right now, as I referred to earlier, who is doing agricultural samples, a couple of thousand a month, and they're stuck. They're stuck because they know it's a unnecessary bottleneck. They don't have the capital expenditure, the capital budget to buy the device that they know they need. And so a program like this is going to help them get around all of the difficulties that they typically see with internal budgeting, right? I mean, it's clean, it's easy, it's straightforward. The discussions that we've had on our equipment at Omni with Blue Street has even included the service contracts. Their response has been great, to the point where I think this customer is ready to jump on something pretty quickly before the end of the year. The other thing is that when you're talking to different labs or institutions or pharma companies, some of them are, leasing is foreign to them. They don't typically do that. And so when you've got a company like Blue Street who can come in and make it easy and seamless and painless to do something like this, it's really a pleasure. Not just, for us, but for the customer, because the customer gets what they want. They don't have to worry about budget limitations, and you can make a difference in the workflow and you team up with companies, Omni, Revity Omni, and Blue Street, to allow scientists to create great science, which is what we're in the business to do. And so, very happy to be working with Brandon to find this as an opportunity. I know he's also working with the cell counting Nexalom team. So happy to have this as an option, in the toolbox for customers who need it.
Yeah, and good point. And thank you, Pete. That's very kind words. But as far as the product offerings are concerned as well, since we're specifically talking about that point, Pete brought up a good little niche that we have as well. We're not afraid of those soft costs, which isn't very unique to Blue Street or any of our other competitors, but we do have a wide ability to also include any type of installation, training, service, warranty, tax, shipping costs that aren't necessarily collateral that would be picked up if somebody stops paying us, but is a necessary part of the project as well. So what we consider soft costs can also be included in all of these products as well.
A lot of this focuses on the pinch, that companies and organizations are feeling right now, where budgets are tighter than they have been, but the work isn't. But that's not the only time that you might want to consider something like this. I think we have two other kind of bigger categories we could chat about. One, those groups that are in that use it or lose it year end, time, and then the third, which is, 2025 is kind of a special window of investment. So let's talk about use it or lose it first. Give us kind of a quick rundown of that, and then how this might work.
Yeah, that's a great point. And we initially, as mentioned previously, we work with the manufacturers and vendor partners primarily to get introductions to the client, which creates that uniformed approach. And we see a much higher success rate than a lot of companies in our space who are just cold calling clients directly, asking if they're buying something, can we help? That being said, a lot of times we do get introduced to IT and lab directors, procurement, controller positions. Ultimately, we would need to speak to a finance decision maker, but we can have that preliminary discussion. The use it or lose it comes up very frequently when I'm talking to a lab director who is looking to utilize their budget, or use the same budget they did in 2025 so they can get those allocations for 2026. So a lot of times there is a surplus or a goal to spend as much money as they did previous year so that they can have those allocated funds for 2026. If anybody's in that situation, happy to discuss and relay some products and information, that we can help them ultimately spend some money for everybody.
Give me an example of what that looks like. If you can be a little bit more specific, how could you help? I mean, if I'm sitting on a budget surplus, how could I best leverage you?
Well, a lot of times it's me and the lab director speaking back and forth, and I'm arming them with the information to take to their C-level to have a serious conversation about buying. They want this piece of equipment. They know it's necessary for the continued advancement of their research and science, but they need their C-level and finance to sign off. So rather than going to them and saying, hey, here's a $275,000 piece of equipment we want to go to move forward with before the end of the year, we can come in and say, it's not only $275,000, but we have a couple options for you to consider, Mr. CFO or VP of Finance, including a 36, 48, and 60 monthly payback on this equipment to mitigate that upfront money. We have structures such as mentioned previously, equipment finance agreements or true leases that you can consider. And then from there, it's always a discussion direct with C-level. But it's not out of the ordinary for companies that have a little bit of capital spend left in their budget to want to use it this year, use it or lose it. Because if a C-level finance decision maker sees that they didn't need as much budget, they're not going to give them any more for 2026, right? So the utilization is pretty key when we're talking about making that decision before the fiscal year end.
So let's say I have $100,000 left in my budget that I haven't spent. Mm-hmm. That's not enough to, purchase a full piece of equipment, but that could be the starting point. And if in one case, if I don't spend that $100,000, I lose it. But in the other, I could use it as a down payment or some other tool that you have available to them.
Yep, of course. Potentially as a down payment for the $100,000 towards an instrument. But again, it's arming with tools, right? To utilize. Not only am I going to lose it, but now my finance team thinks I don't need that budget next year.
Use it or lose it drives us crazy because typically we'll get the buy signal from a customer at the very last minute, which puts delivery in jeopardy, right? Because our systems are pretty much customized to what the specific end user requirements are. And so the sooner that you know that you can utilize a funding organization or lease or whatever the situation is, the more time it's going to give me to deliver to get it there by the end of the year. So it's something that happens every year. In fact, we have it right now with a large pharma company that wants a unit delivered, and we're going to be running as close as possible to getting it out the door in time. So it's the nature of the industry, right? So I think situations like this, when you can plan in advance, maybe in Q2, Q3, then you have more time really to plan out truly what your capital expenditures need to be directed to and where you can use this type of situation for a product like what we sell.
Let's switch gears and talk about 2025 being a kind of a special window for investment with a big, beautiful bill. Brandon, you want to give us kind of the 30-second overview of what that is, like enough information for me to...
Yeah, for sure. Now, I definite overview is a good word to state. I always like to stipulate when I start to get into these conversations with finance leaders at companies, they have their own accounting principles. So I would always lean on them to educate themselves, look into the true accounting principles for their company directly, whether that's an outside accounting source they're using or internal CFO. That being said, and regardless of which side of the coin you are politically, there are incentives that we've reviewed and researched in the Big Beautiful Bill that have not gone to market in the previous years, including a depreciation amount through Section 179 of up to $2.5 million, which I believe, don't quote me on this, but was closer to $1 million last year. So, from our perspective, the current administration, again, regardless of your political ideologies, are incentivizing companies to move forward with equipment acquisitions this year. And we have some calculator tools that we've embedded and provide as information purposes only. But I've seen a lot where $100,000, $200,000, $300,000 projects, companies are saving almost half of that project total. So the true cost ends up being almost 50% of what the instrument actually is. Again, they need to talk about that with their own internal team. We provide the information for them to make the proper decisions. And the last note to that is we have no idea what 26 looks like. So if you want to take advantage of what is currently in place, purchases would have to be made this month. And then the unknown of 2026 is still something that we'll all look forward to and do our own research come January and February.
So was it 2.5 million? Is that right for the amount?
In total, and it could be multiple equipment purchases, doesn't have to be one.
Right.
They can bundle different types of equipment. But I believe it is 2.5 million in write-offs through the new bill.
Okay. Pete, that's like 10 LHs.
There it is.
Yeah. It's another very valuable option to be able to put in the hands of a lab director or a senior scientist or somebody who's going to go to a VP or a CFO to get a piece of equipment that they really need that will really streamline their workflow and replace what's missing in the lab, meaning resources, without having to outlay a tremendous amount of cash that's going to drain the coffers to be able to do something with CapEx, later on in the year.
Yeah, I would say too, it's just from an informative standpoint from my end too. I hear it all the time. Oh, I work with academia, they don't finance. Oh, I work with Fortune 500 companies, they don't finance. Oh, I work with startups, they can't get approved. And that's from our relationship with our vendor and manufacturing partners. We're always happy to have a discussion, even if it doesn't work out, but we can put our consulting hat on for somebody, and not to be combative in any sense. We're approved in the UC system here in Southern California to work throughout the state. We have a good handful of academia direct clients, private and public colleges and institutions that do finance and lease. We have a handful of public Fortune 500 companies we've worked with, the likes of, and it's all public information, Genentech and Amgen and Johnson & Johnson, who they make their decision very pointedly and lease all equipment that they buy. So usually it comes back to, of course startups are going to want to borrow money. They don't have any money. They can't get approved. I would say, yes, that's true, as far as them wanting money, and we've had some luck approving startups by creating really solid stories, all the way to publicly traded companies who, for various reasons, will lease and finance. So, those are the outline clientele base. Everything that falls into the middle, of course, it's a conversation point. But I just wanted to reiterate, it is, the equipment leasing and financing world is a really unknown $1 trillion business. So money's being borrowed all the time for this type of equipment.
A lot of startups, right? I know there's a lot of companies who are cash strapped because they're trying to get off the ground. They could use equipment. San Diego area, San Francisco, Cambridge, probably hundreds of small startups who could really benefit from something like the LH96. It's out of reach because of budget limitations or just a lack of cash. And this type of solution can really help them kickstart what they're doing and get to market faster.
Yeah, and I think what we see is a lot of, well, we've always done it this way thinking.
Yeah.
And, especially now where so much is up in the air and so many different things are happening, I think taking a critical look at what your options are to get that money in, and it's not really not the endpoint being the money, but the equipment to enable the science, like unlocking that, really looking at some of these more creative ways that they just haven't considered before.
Yeah, and outside of any of the incentives for this year or beautiful products I could put in front of somebody that's super unique and fits the bill, it goes back to the old adage that cash is king. And what borrowing from a Blue Street Capital can do for companies too is, whether cash strapped or not, it allows them flexibility for other uses. Because we don't do, and we don't pretend to do, lines of credit, real estate, insurance, staff, but utilizing our services for their equipment needs, which is a big need moving forward, can allow them for continued growth and flexibility in other areas of their business as well.
So thinking about this, I imagine that there are some preconceived notions about what this might look like. What are some that you've heard from business owners or lab managers or whoever that you'd like to set the record straight on?
Yeah, I get it all the time. Obviously the big one is cost and rate, and it's funny. He would agree with me. Our president's a little old school here. He's like, in the 80s, interest rates were at 18 and 20, and nobody had any issues. During COVID, rates, and I'll be the first to say, my mortgage is 2.8%. So I think people got used to that, right? And they'll see a rate. I think one of the big misconceptions is, rate aside, is, and it's very simple, just calculating the overall finance charge, right? Rate or not, what's the cost for me above what the product is, and does it make sense over time to borrow money? So whether I'm selling my cost of money at 6% or 11%, depending on the client profile, we really like to flip the conversation into uniqueness of product, monthly payments. Can we fit it into your budget? Does it make sense for you from ROI and research perspective? And again, it goes back to us really learning what we can put in front of them that makes the most sense. So number one is always cost, and I don't fault anybody for asking or trying to negotiate. I expect it. I would say the second misconception, whether it's from a vendor partner or a client, is speed. When they introduce Blue Street Capital, they are introducing another point of contact that might need and request more information. That being said, private company, I have direct access to my leadership, and if information is shared quickly, I can set day of meetings to make decisions. So it's not, I always compare it to the real estate industry a little bit. We're not going through a 30 to 45 day escrow. This can be start to finish conversation on a quick side, agreements and terms and approvals, 5 days. If things are going quickly, and again, outlier situation. Don't get me wrong. I've had conversations with companies that can't just make decisions or provide information. And Pete can attest to this probably, 6 months.
Yeah.
But Blue Street will work quick. So one, cost, two, speed. I can't think of another, there's obviously other items that would come into the equation that are a misconception to you're taking advantage of us, used car sales, dealership, whatever. I've heard it all. But we at Blue Street pride ourselves in being a quick and very honest company. We outline what is going to happen very simplistically and quickly and honest to all of our customers. But those good question, Bill. Those are the two that come to mind the quickest.
Bill, you and I have had several conversations about traditional marketing and how traditional marketing doesn't work in untraditional markets, which I believe we're in right now.
Yeah.
There's a lot of upheaval, a lot of change, and this is not a traditional funding solution that most of our prospects have thought about or seen in the past. And so this is quick. It's easy. You have to look at being agile in this type of market. You have to look at coming up with new solutions and being able to address the needs of the market, in this case, the life science market, in ways that hadn't been looked at in the past. And I think that this is really a great solution for our customers and for Revvity customers in general.
Are there any other circumstances where now would be a really good opportunity to take another look at investing in equipment?
Yeah, and I'm glad you brought that up, Bill, because I did think of one other aspect I didn't cover that Pete brought up, which was that unknown space. And my head actually went to a different side of the coin. COVID was unknown. Natural disasters are unknown. Government administration coming, new office, legislature, policies, really unknown in the future. Another thing to consider too is technology. What's happening right now in the biotech and lab space over the course of the next 5 years might advance at a 10x speed, a 1000x speed, might not advance at all. We don't know. So I would say another offering that a lease or finance option brings to the table is that flexibility for potentially upgrading at the end of 5 years, because not to say any machine is going to be obsolete, but there might be the new greatest, latest version or advancement in research that would give you guys or companies the flexibility to make those decisions at end of term instead of being locked down with a piece of $200,000 of equipment that's now holding some books and paper. So I did want to bring that to the table as I thought of the unknown aspect to all these conversation points as well.
Yeah, I'd like to add to that the time aspect. So regardless of what the economy holds, 6 months from now, 12 months from now, the one thing that's guaranteed that you will not get is more time. So if time reduction on the bench is paramount, which I know in most companies that are doing sample prep, it is. Yeah. It behooves you, I think, to look at every option now to do that, because you are guaranteed not to get more time in 2026. In fact, it'll be the opposite.
What does it look like? Is there a minimum to get started with this? Are there rails that you can share that most companies need to consider as they're digging into this and even looking at it?
I would say, generally speaking, and it's not just a Blue Street standard, but companies who borrow more for longer, my cost is reduced. So we have certain thresholds, as most companies do, that if we allow you to borrow more money, we could provide a slightly more competitive, compared to the market, offering to the said client. Usually projects under $25,000 make more sense, and I'll be completely transparent with everybody, that they would speak to their direct banking partner first. To look into their potential line of credit, cash outright purchase. 25,000 and up is where a conversation can really start about us bringing in a competitive edge and a really sound product for their team to consider. Another good point too, I would say averages. I want to say our average one single transaction or request for financials this year has upticked a little bit more. It's up at about $170,000. That being said, I would say on one-off transactions, we've built really strong relationships with companies who borrow upwards of a couple million over the course of a year for multiple needs. But I would say our average transaction really falls anywhere between $50,000 and $500,000 on a one instrument product and piece.
Brandon, if I have a customer who doesn't have the banking relationship or chooses not to go that route, and they want to look at something like one of our bead ruptors that's in fully accoutramented or fully equipped in the 20 to 25,000 range, is that something you can help them with?
Yeah. We have looked at, and there's always outliers to the situation. If it's a company or a referred partner that we really want to build a relationship with, I would even go the empathetic approach. Being here for 6.5 years, I guess I don't want to say I have some gusto to go to my credit team, but if I can, I got a couple sales to make. I got to entrust the Revity team to bring me into a project. I then get to a client. I have to make sure that they trust me handling a $25,000 to $500,000 serious conversation about putting a product. And then I gotta build and trust a relationship with my credit underwriting team. Then I want to bring them good transactions. All this being said, not beating around the bush, we're happy to discuss any project and put my consulting at it. We do have offerings in the $10,000 to $25,000 range. I usually just like to note, hey, it's good to have a couple options on the table outside of myself. Anything above that, we can definitely put our best foot forward on.
Okay, so I'm head of a small company, small group. I'm tight on cash, but I just don't want to spend a ton of time or complexity on this. Can you give me like the bare minimum information you would need from them to get this thing going?
Yeah, right off the bat. Again, all I need is a quote for what they're buying. That will give me the specs of what the hard costs are to the soft costs and the amount, along with a quote of the company itself. From there, I have enough tools, I would say, to look at public information to say, hey, we don't have a single question for you. We feel like this is approved. Here's some options based on our conversation for your team to consider. That'd be number one. Number two, if there isn't enough bandwidth there on the public domain, let's call it a company that has never borrowed for equipment financing, there's nothing through their big bank or SBA, they've been in business, let's call it just over 2 years, there might be a request for a quick credit application and some bank statements. Above that, we would maybe, again, it's really dependent on what's given, the information provided. Day of, I'll have a meeting with my team. And then the third piece of the puzzle would be financials on the business themselves, if we don't have access to them. But again, going back to my cliche answer before, we'll work quickly if that information is shared quickly and is needed. We have a pretty robust, what we call application-only platform, where I can get up to $250,000, $500,000 in certain situations without asking a single question. So it's very project dependent. Yeah.
Okay.
If I could add to that, Bill, we had a situation with this one specific customer and got an answer back and had a quote from Brandon in less than an hour.
Wow.
We have some writing on the wall behind me that says speed is a force. That being said, I'm not going to act recklessly, right? I'll do my due diligence. I'll update our CRM. I will have a conversation with my leadership team. There's always a set of eyes and ears outside of mine that is looking at a project when we get to the point of providing some preliminary offerings. But again, we know whether our solution is the right one or not. It's very important for us to act quickly so companies can make the proper decisions for our trusted vendor partners like Pete. So at the end of the day, we want to be a value add for everybody involved.
This has been really solid. I'd like to wrap up with some advice to anyone looking at the end of the year and feeling like they're getting pressure from all sides. Brandon, for you, top 3 suggestions or tips for making it through the end of the year and maybe making it through this process?
Yeah. I don't want to number off 1, 2, or 3, I guess. But what I would say is be open to the conversation. Even if your team does have a budget allocated, even if you feel like leadership would never sign off, even if your company has never borrowed any money at all, it is worth a conversation and a consideration for the unknowns. Number one. So I guess that would be number one. No one knew COVID was going to hit. We had a ton of companies. And I'm one of many sales reps here at Blue Street, but I had at least 8 to 10 companies coming back to me 3 months after the fact, asking if they could look at doing a lease back because they spent too much money. So it's worth a conversation. And number 2, I'm in my role here at Blue Street, I don't want to say need business. Everybody needs business, but I'm not trying to pressure people to make decisions. My job on a meeting is to inform and educate, and act as if I'm in their shoes. So I'm not putting a ton of pressure on clients when we get to the point where we're meeting and discussing options. My job is to put good options in front of them for them to make the appropriate decisions moving forward. So my one big piece of advice is if there's any consideration for large scale equipment acquisitions, I would love to put my consulting hat on, discuss, and provide some options before the end of the year.
Pete, how about you? Top 3 recommendations for the end of the year.
Get creative would be the first. Brandon referred to this earlier. People don't necessarily look at, financing or leasing as an option. They look at one thing, whether we have the money or whether we don't. I would say look at the ROI. Right? If you know that there is a gap in the workflow, if you know, what we like to say in this business, garbage in is garbage out, right? Your assays, your end result are only as good as the front end sample prep. So if you know that there is a gap there, why wouldn't you actively try to solve it? And sometimes funding isn't the limiting factor. I mean, we'll work with you to get a solution that will work within whatever means your company is willing to look at, whether that be outright purchase or lease, financing, and we'll help as much as we can in that aspect. And I think the third thing is, the future is uncertain. If people think that it's going to be better next year, no, as Brandon said, no one knows that. We have no idea what's coming. I heard earlier this year that, Q1 and Q2 were going to stink, but Q3 was going to be better, and then Q4 was going to be better. And guess what? We're in Q4 of 2025 right now, and it hasn't gotten better. So if you're waiting to see when it gets better, you may be dealing with this for the next quarter or 4 quarters. And as a scientist, as a lab, as an institution, you've got to do what's best to deliver for your shareholders and for your customers. And if it means, getting creative with putting a piece of equipment in from Omni, from Revity, I think you need to look at that. So get creative would be the biggest thing that I would say. And we will do everything we can here at Omni to help you, including bringing in our partners at Blue Street if that's the best solution.
Brandon, Pete, thank you both.
Thanks, Bill.
Thank you. This was fun. Been awesome.